This is the Daily Saints Pod with Zach and Greg. Hello and welcome to the Daily Saints Pod with Zach and Greg, but today it is only me, Zach. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, evening, whenever you're listening to this. It is episode 399 and I'm recording this directly after our 1-1 draw with West Bromwich Albion, which I'm not going to lie, I have been building up probably for about the last 45 minutes to me doing an episode where we have lost the game. And that is still kind of feel like we really didn't deserve that. But I guess this is the difference between the team that we were and the team that we are now. And the fact that we're able to kind of, I guess, show a bit of character to snatch a draw at the last minute. I'm sure heartbreaking for Albion fans, to be perfectly honest. Absolutely fantastic for my co-host, who would probably be saying right now that some draws feel like a win, and I concur, that draw definitely feels like a win. So, as it's me on my own, there's going to be significantly more structure than usual, because if I go off script completely, it doesn't end well, and I don't want to record this like 9 times. So, let's have a chat about before the match. Obviously, me and Greg have kept in contact despite the fact that he's not here. And obviously the lineups came through and we were pretty much on the ball from our preview. Stevens came in for Wood. Fullback stayed the same. Greg kind of ummed and ahed about whether Gillard was coming in, but I assumed that we wouldn't. Middle of the park, my prediction was correct. Charles started with Downs, but obviously with Downs we need to watch him due to that potential ban from the yellow cards. And pretty sure today he got close with that ref, but luckily never in the end. I said Cienza and Azaz are a given, and Matsuki got the nod over Fellows, but I expected to see him later. And we also thought that Stewart would start, considering Lauren started at the weekend and was rested a little bit before today. Expected the bench to be the same. It was always nice to see Romeo in the bench despite him not getting any game time today. No Quasi, which was, a little bit odd, but it is what it is. Greg's prediction at this point, by the way, was good lineup, hope we smash them. Boy, howdy, did he not realise the pain he was going to have to sit through. But, it's Saints, isn't it? We don't make anything easy. He was having such a good time there. He always feels bad. Everyone was so nice. He feels bad for the fact that they're going to be singing later on. You know what they're going to be singing. Don't know if I necessarily heard it on broadcast, but you know the one. I was having a look at some of the pre-build up as well. Charlie Taylor is currently on loan to them, so obviously he was ineligible to play against us. I kind of forgot that Charlie Taylor was on loan to West Brom. I'm not gonna lie. Looking at some of the social media in the build up to the game, there was a lot of worry from West Brom fans about the defence, and I don't really think they had to, right? I think that they put in a very, very good performance. And I have some thoughts on some things that have happened that probably, despite the fact that we had a big episode on how much we dislike VAR, again, there are lots of points during this game where I got angry texts from Greg about the referee, some of which I agree, some of which I don't know. Obviously, it's difficult when you're there to see what's going on. He said that it kind of looked empty and the stadium was quite quiet, but, I think that changed throughout the game. And but, as always, away fans in absolutely excellent form. So, after we start from the start. So, obviously, first half kicks off. We had a good start with Leo running a wild throw from West Brom that led to a corner where luckily nothing came of it. But that kind of, obviously the long throw is back in vogue. And that was kind of a bit of a worry of, are we going to have to defend these all game? And there were a couple of times that we saw it take place. Then it's kind of about 10 minutes in, you're kind of looking at how West Brom are playing and they're doing, I think, better than we expected them to do, right? By this point, they'd won their second corner. And I think that the prediction is that they would be doing a lot worse than they actually ended up playing. and we could see signs of it very, very sort of early on. We pick up a foul after Cienza's barged over. Greg asks, why is it not a booking? Commentary that I listened to kind of also agreed on the same thing. And see all of our episodes on referees and consistency and all that kind of stuff, right? Like we talk about it all the time. It's something we don't want to talk about all the time. And it's one of those things where we've also talked about why we're not big advocates of VAR. It just is what it is. Nothing comes of the free kick. And some stats popped up with sort of West Brom being winless in all home games this year. And it just feels like we weren't being serious. Is probably the note I got about quarter of an hour in. It kind of, we keep being caught offside. It isn't the walkover that was expected, nor the walkover that we wanted. And you could already see the fatigue in some of the players that had played from the weekend. There was sort of talk about our really good record against Albion, how many times we've won against them. But as the game started going on, it was sort of, I started noticing their players playing really well, like Jed Wallace. And then it started to get a bit better. We had some good balls in, good ball in from Bree. Matt Ski misplaced a pass, but they're starting to get in a little bit. And then we have trouble down the right-hand side a little bit. Matt Ski concedes sort of a corner. Luckily, we get rid. Cienza's knocked down, comes back up. And it's just sort of carries on like that for a little bit, right? So at one point, we probably had what I would consider to be one of our best chances where Stewart is in the box, just can't quite get his feet right, doesn't hit it, goes to Charles, who takes it round too far, and we just don't kind of take the chances. And those sort of missed chances, once again, will come back to bite us later on. I'm not going to lie, like the back and forth for me and Greg at this point was just, it's getting pretty boring. It's becoming very tick-attacker, it's becoming very possession, which is always going to be the case when we're breaking down a side of the low block. But the way that I compared it both later and at this point to Greg is we're chatting about, it just reminds me of the Charlton game. Obviously, the difference with the Charlton game is that we had managed to get the goal. So although we eventually drew, it's funny how that game had a lot of criticism, and rightly so, and felt like a loss. But this point felt so much more because it felt so undeserved, if I'm totally honest. And it's just we're constantly getting it close, and then we lose it. And then we get a couple of throw-ins. Cienza manages to take a shot 30 minutes in, but that goes completely wide. There's, again, like Matsuki pops it in, they go straight to the goalkeeper. So we've got a lot of possession. We're firmly in control of the game at this point. But nothing's really happening. And then it's sort of put 35 minutes, there is a worrying attack from West Brom, but no one gets to it. And that's the point that Cienza goes down and Cienza receives treatment. And you sort of see almost immediately the substitution sign from the physio. I don't know what's happened at this point. I haven't listened to the post-match conference. I've literally dived straight into recording. I'm hoping it's not as serious as it looks, but I think it probably is. It's going to be one of those things where the amount of football that's been played, the amount of managing the players, and we spoke about a couple of times over the last week, it does feel like we're one or two players away from an injury crisis. And that is, of course, the player that you really don't want, our most creative player, the player that drags us up the pitch sometimes. And I think it's just a bit of a problem. So Cienza goes off, Falloons comes on, Cienza hobbles down the tunnel, which is nothing that you ever want to see. It's cast from the Baggies fans who clap on Fellows. It's nice, but obviously straight after they pip us quite quickly, and there's an attack, and it kind of rolls into that. Then we have a free kick after Taylor Harbour-Bellis is taken out, but it's then headed directly into the gloves of the keeper. So again, it's not taking our chances, or alternatively, the chances we're taking just straight at the keeper. And they manage to get, they're starting to increase their chances at this point. The pace is picking up, and luckily they kick it, goes wide. And then, kid you not, my 42nd minute note is, we're giving them well too many chances for my liking at the end of the half. And then 44 minutes, set piece, cleared off the line, follow-up ball, scrappy goal that was coming. So I don't want to predict things like that, right? But I felt like everybody who was watching the game kind of felt it coming. And then obviously we had the kickoff after the game, after the goal. We've then got the clash of heads between Bree an Albion player. Both players are down for quite a while. Luckily, it came to kind of nothing. They both get bandaged up. Obviously, it's stopped and it's a little bit drama for a while. You don't really know what's going on. But luckily, they both get back up and Bree does continue on to play the second half. But me and Greg both noted that he was very obviously struggling more than I think more than usual until he was substituted in the second half. And then, so we get to half time, and then I asked my illustrious co host for his thoughts. And he said, we're too slow in the build up, which I wholeheartedly agreed. We have not created enough from the possession that we've had, which I also wholeheartedly agreed. We don't deserve to be behind, which at this point I don't really agree with, because if we'd taken our chances and we'd gone 1-0 up at that point, we wouldn't have to worry about them hitting on the counter as much as they were. And again, just sloppy, not getting rid of the ball from a set piece is just it's just a haunting thing for us as a team, right? He said he hoped for some minor tweaks in the second half, and that should be enough, hopefully. I was not as confident as Greg at this point. He also pointed out that the chances we did have were straight of the keeper, and I said, that's why I am not as confident as him, because of that exact reason, right? When you're shooting it directly at the keeper, it's never going to be a good time. Big ask without Leo, time for Fellows or Matsuki to step up. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. Yeah, I said, it's crunch time, because it's left Bree exposed too often. I said, I agree, but I kind of expected Fellows to do more, and I found it weird that they weren't just switched quite quickly. Why they'd left them on opposing sides, it's odd, in my opinion, but there we are. And then he said, just know if we manage to equalise, West Bromwich Albion's head will drop and it will feel like it's happening again, which obviously it did. It just took a while. So there's then a bit of speculation where he doesn't see Larin jogging, so he just assumes that Larin is coming on for Stewart. And he said, well, it's not like they're resting him because of his old bones. We got Romeo out there, which did make me laugh. And then obviously the Fellows and Matsuki are then switched. And then it's a fast start with the ball in. We get a free kick. It's on target for Manning, but the keeper got to it. And then there's the yellow for Jack Stevens. And Greg is annoyed, I guess I'll put it that way, considering the first half. And luckily, the free kick came to nothing, right? You just think at this point he thought that they should have picked up a card for their foul in the first half, and I kind of agree. Crossing from Fellows, but it hits the defender and goes out for a throw, and just continued to be sort of, there would be a set piece, such as a corner. You're hoping for it to come to something. It comes to nothing. Goes out for a goal kick as THB misses it, and the mistake gives it to them in our half. But at this point, they're really, really putting the press on, right? And I think me and Greg both agree that their press was impressive, but even more so towards the end of the game. It was only sort of when they thought it was won, the 6 minutes went up, and we somehow pulled a goal out of nowhere. That that's, at this point, I was very much feeling the pressure from their team. It wasn't quiet anymore at this point. You could hear the home crowd in full voice, but I could still hear when the Saints in the background. So throw it from Manning, but it's still very tick-a-tacker possession style, and it just ends up going back. There were a lot of kind of opportunities during this time where we were getting it forward. Decided we couldn't do anything with it. Went back, and it's just kind of, we've seen this before, and we know that it's going to be like this against these types of teams. And they just need to find answers specifically against these sort of low block teams or teams that are going to absorb all the pressure. Because, we've now seen it from Charlton, who managed to get a draw out of us. West Brom have now managed to get a draw out of us. It's almost like, are we going to play better against Coventry at the weekend? Because they're going to, bring a game to us? Maybe. I don't know how that's going to be without Sienta. But yeah, another corner. Hopefully it's not wasted. That was the miss hit from Fellows. I went miles away. And, I predicted a Fellows goal just for Greg. And I just think he's cursed that man. That poor boy is never going to get a goal. Entirely because of the fact that Greg has just cursed him. So, yeah, we then had another sort of, it was about 60 minutes in, this is when me and Greg both start to get kind of cross the ref, right? And like again, this thing we talk about quite a lot. But at this point, Laren is pulled back and given advantage because he kind of like manages to get off of him, and then eventually he gets pipped, comes up to our end. You're expecting afterwards something to happen, and he just has a word. He's like, "Nah, sorry, mate, can't calm it down." It's like literally because later on the same thing is going to happen. There will be a professional foul from Cam Bragg. Bragg will get booked, right? Pretty, because that's what you'd expect from that. It's just the inconsistencies that bothered us. It very much felt like, especially like early on, it's like he didn't want to give too many cards out in the early end of the game to kind of like keep the flow of the game going. And we've talked about the role of referees doing that before and what our opinions are of it. But it's just really, really frustrating when you don't see consistency across the game, and it's very, very much felt like it this game. And you could even see because afterwards, Laren was kept talking to the ref. I'm surprised he didn't get at that point told off for dissent, but hey ho. And then it's just sort of frantic, what can you describe as midfield play? There's a lot of sort of sliding in tackles, and then the ball almost gets behind Perret, who somehow keeps it in. This is the kind of ball that it feels like it's going to be scrambled in. He somehow gets to it. I said that this is as important as a goal. I said it still doesn't feel like we're scoring at this point, but that is incredibly important. And if it wasn't for that save, I don't think, if they'd scored, if they'd made it 2, I don't think we'd have come back just because of the nature of this game. So that was an incredibly important save. You can argue to the cows come home whether or not Zunu would have made that, or McCarthy would have made that, or even Ramsdale with what's going on with his potential return to us at the end of the season. But, fair play to Perret. He, again, we feel those very, hanging on about it, but the Boric-esque vibes. But then those are some of the big differences. And you can see him very commanding his box. I just wish it was slightly better when it was a set piece. And so at this point, as I said, Greg is screaming ref bias and getting mad. And I just wanted to keep you all updated, as I have throughout the entirety of this podcast. And then there's a silly foul given to Matchday, which again, seemed really soft. But at that point, he's brought off, and as is Downs, and Adozie and Bragg are brought on. Adozie battles, and there's a throw. Azaz tries his luck, but doesn't really get anywhere. Again, this is one of those, when we talk about Azaz having really hot and cold games, this is one of those cold games for him. He was kind of, in my opinion, quite anonymous for most of the game, and he tried a shot here and there, or tried something here or there, but one of the only things that I genuinely remember is him back passing. It didn't go well, and then they intercepted, and then they had almost like a very good attack off the back of it. So the corner from nothing, and then they give away a free kick. Another good save from Perret, still 1-0. And then at one point, this is where Greg's kicking off about them time wasting already because one of their players go down with cramp. Considering it's the only time one of their players went down from cramp, I genuinely don't know if that's the case. And he'll be sorry to hear that I don't necessarily agree with him there. And I also pointed out to him that, that's what you do. If you are a relegation-threatened side who are trying to get their first win at home, you will pull out all of the dark cards. I wouldn't begrudge us to do it, right? But I don't know if that necessarily was at that point. And then we get to sort of 72, 73 minutes, and what I've got written down is that there's just no vibe here currently. It just didn't feel at that point that there was anything that was going to be salvageable. It just didn't feel that way at all. The momentum was still very much with them. Their fans were really behind them. Their team were playing really well together. There was just a lot more, we looked tired. We looked fatigued and very, very much on show. So Adozie won a free kick, and finally West Bromwich Albion pick up a card for similar fouls that we picked up throughout the game. The ball came off of Gilchrist, who ended up being a goal kick, and then that's when they decided to make all of their changes. And he obviously got a lot of criticism for the game because I think he's naturally a right back. They've moved into centre back, but he had a better game than I think they'd been expecting. And Archer on and Brie off at this point. So we're in the 83rd minute with instructions to Bragg that we don't know what they were. Obviously, before that, there was a shot from Charles that kind of just went wide. I think at that point he was just trying to do anything. Albion's press at this point was ridiculous. Both me and Greg agreed it was really good, and we were really, really struggling to cope with it. I was really hoping that it would be Archer's time to sort of make a difference, and then for about another 4 or 5 minutes, it was just like, no, we literally cannot get out of our box. And then at one point, Laren is taken out. We have a free kick, literally comes to nothing, and then we get to the point where it's sort of, we're right at sort of the 90th minute, and I said, like, the wounded animal syndrome has really come into play. I was kind of right about that, and I was really, really frustrated. And then I mugged Greg off for his AI and over 2.5 goals, because that predicts that every single game. And they said nothing to me at this point, and I realised why. It's because he let me enjoy the moment of the goal without ruining it by spoiling it for me. And I got in trouble with my wife, and my cat made sure I knew that I was in trouble too, by screaming at me for absolutely celebrating. And I'm really, really happy and glad for Laren. I thought he had a much better half than Stuart, and I don't know why that is. I think the physicality from the West Brom players, I think Laren was able to deal with a little bit better and was able to get involved. But it was a really, really good ball from a Dozy to Laren that Laren managed to score. And it kind of felt like it had just come out of nowhere, to be perfectly honest, and it kind of did. And that is, again, the big mentality switch, is we were able to do something like that. We didn't just completely give up. But for a lot of that game, it did feel like it. Don't get me wrong, this was no comeback like we had against Leicester by any stretch of the imagination. It was very, very much a sort of, we still believe we might be able to get something. And then obviously after that, we picked up a corner, and all of a sudden it's like completely, we're at the races, we're running, we're charging balls down. It's sort of the real question is, where has this been? I don't know. And then sort of 3 to 6 minutes have been played. It was almost like playing an entire other half of football. They get a break, and somehow it doesn't happen. We go on the attack again a couple of times, and then it just kind of ends. And somehow we picked up a point. And that isn't to throw disrespect or shade to our team that actually put in the effort to get that point. I think they worked really, really hard towards the end, but it was only after that goal was scored, and that goal kind of came from nothing. And that's, again, the impact of the substitutions and why the ability for us to have depth. Again, why it feels that Dozy's like a new signing, and I think that, Laren was an incredibly, I think myself included and Greg, never heard of this guy, who is he? We did our profile on him, our opinions changed. He had his first touch of the ball and it was a goal. And I think that he brings a lot of the qualities that Stuart brings, that has been present. And because of the way that we play now, I think it's really good to have him as an option. We'll see where it comes end of the season. But, I think that the goals that he scored alone, at the point that he has won alone, have probably made that, loan very successful, in my opinion. So then we're at the end of the game. And obviously, post-match summary from Greg, as he was leaving the stadium. He'd love to have sent a voice message, but one, he had no voice left, and two, stadiums are well too loud for that. So 11 unbeaten from a performance that didn't deserve it. And as you can tell, by the end of that game, he had come round to my opinion that I don't think we were deserving really of anything from the game. Laren was excellent when he came on. We will struggle without Leo, but it was a very hard fought point, and that is a big part of the game that there's a complete shadow over it, in my opinion. We don't know how bad it's going to be, but considering how quickly he went down, considering how quickly he came off, I don't think it's going to be a good one. And I think it's going to be a struggle without him. Wish we played with the same urgency the whole second half as we did after the goal. Wholeheartedly agree. We just didn't. And it was only sort of that sort of 5 to 6 minute period where it just burst into life. And it's a bit worrying that, some of the players didn't really step up, in my opinion. I don't know if it's just fatigue and tiredness with a lot of minutes, but kind of expected a bit more from most of them, from Matchday, from Zaz, from Fellows, all of them going forward. I understand that it's difficult to break down, and I understand the press from West Brom was really good, but wasn't great. He said Charles was very good too. There's been a lot of split opinion. I've seen people highly critical on social media of him. I thought he played quite well towards the end, especially where he was like getting the balls and moving the ball forward. And Bree was struggling second half for sure. Which again, considering it's not the only game we've got this week, we've got another game coming up thick and fast. I don't know whether or not we'll see him Friday. It depends how severe that head injury is. Hopefully, it's nothing but superficial. But that was a while to be down. And yeah, I guess if not, we might end up seeing Gillette come in at some point. But we've already talked about how we don't want to tinker. And with Bree, it's been like a new signing, but didn't really feel that energy that second half from him, and it's probably because of the head injury. So I guess we'll have to see where we go. There's a lot of question marks off the back of this game. Again, it's a draw that kind of feels like a win, but it's completely overshadowed by potential injury. And for me, it was the point I've made multiple times of we kind of feel like we're one or two injuries away from a proper injury crisis, because the transfer business, in my opinion, we did in January is good. I understand why we've got rid of a lot of those players, a lot of them here and not doing stuff, but the areas we strengthened, I also understand. Goalkeeper was a priority. Striker was also a priority after Armour left, and again, I think Aaron's been a good replacement because of the way we play now. But you'd wonder maybe if we needed an extra pullback or two. And obviously with Wellington still out, Manning doesn't really have a natural backup other than Gillette. Rory's still out. We're going to be quite quiet on the right. So does that mean that we then end up having to go to a back three again just because of injuries and put fellows on the right? And I don't think any of us really want to see that. It's not worked. So yeah, it's slightly worrying. And all of that is, raises the question of, was it worth going as strong in the FA Cup at the weekend? If we'd lost, would there maybe have been a bigger reaction this game to show that we're not like that? Maybe. Was also the momentum important to keep players playing at it? Yes. But I think that the fatigue was evident. And me and Greg have talked a lot about how mentality switch is a very, very important thing. And that is one of the key differences between teams that win and teams that don't. Right? Ultimately, it's how much willingness the players are going to put in to wanting to win the game. Like the rest of it is that they know how to play football. I think he actually summed it up with the conversation we were having in the background was, I don't know if we had it on I don't know if we had it on this daily podcast because we still talk so much about it. Was sort of some of the big differences with Will Still is that Will Still was a fantastic coach at teaching players how to play football. A lot of our players were already, as most people point out, good players. They know how to play football. They didn't have the mentality and the confidence, and he wasn't really able to instill that. Somehow, we don't know why, we don't know how, Hondas have been able to do that part, because obviously when you're asking people who are professional footballers to play football, they will know how to do it. It's almost like that's been the more important transitional part of the game. And that's why I think it was so important to keep that going. In Greg's opinion, he said he would much rather see us win the FA Cup and stay in the Championship than make the playoffs and potentially stumble. I don't know. His answer to me was, I was slightly surprised by the fact that he was so willing to be all right with us not getting promoted. And I don't know. I feel like some of the people kind of in agreement with that. But one of the issues you've got is that how do you keep on to the talent that we really like? Do you think Leo will stay? I understand that he really loves the club. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know if somebody comes in for a giant bid for him. There's a lot of players we really hoped would stay that wouldn't. Bear in mind, there's a lot of players that came to us this season because they wanted to get promoted, right? Azaz is a perfect example. Didn't shine well tonight, but he came to us initially because he wanted to go in for a team that were fighting promotion. Now Middlesbrough are right up there ahead of us. And, you've got to wonder whether or not for him, looking back and seeing if that move was a mistake. If you saw any of the conversations with any of our players interviewed at the beginning of the season, what their ambition was, it was to get to the Premier League and play in the Premier League. You've already seen, again, I'm going to say rumours because it's rumours at this point, the stuff to do with Castellanda and him potentially being worried about missing out on Premier League football because that's ultimately what he wanted. So that debate's there. Maybe me and Greg talk about it a little bit more next week. I, for one, really glad for the win at the weekend. If Leo didn't play that game, does that mean that he doesn't pick up an injury today? Maybe. or is it an unfortunate accident due to a collision? If he'd had that collision in a different game, could have picked up the same thing? It's really, really hard to predict all of these factors. I know that everyone will have opinions on it, but I think that I understand the mentality of going in to try and win as many games as possible. I also completely understand that I feel like our physio department have managed to work miracles to keep us as injury-free as we've been this season, all things considered. And I don't think you can do that forever. And as we are now breaking into a really important part of the season where we know that playoffs are probably our only hope if we can even manage that, we had a chance to go within a point. We're now not within a point. So, hey ho. I guess that's today. Thank you to everybody that has joined me on my long rant about today's game and our thoughts and feelings. It's basically like Greg's been here. Bless him. I'm sure he'll be having a fantastic time on the drive back, and I'm really glad that he got to at least see a goal at his away game. And I'm sure his kids will be really happy to see it too. Yeah, it's just not what we wanted, but we got a 3 point, in my opinion, because we didn't really deserve anything. And it was only really towards the end of the game that we really started for whatever reason. So we will be back tomorrow to preview the game of the weekend. But until then, we are on all the social medias. We are on Facebook, X, the Everything app, Blue Sky, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of them. And let us know what your thoughts of the game are. Was it a point? Did the point feel like a win? Are you worried that we are one injury away from a crisis? Are you worried that if this is a long-term injury for Leo, we are already at crisis? Maybe are you hoping that the mentality of the team will get us through because it managed to get us something out of today? So yeah, thank you all for joining me, and I will see you in the next one.
This is the Daily Saints Pod with Zach and Greg.